Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I did not care for your inflection on that opening line. Would you like to try it again?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I didn't care for that one either, but I think we're just going to plow through and we're going to say we got to watch practice number 2 of the spring for Ohio State football. Got to learn some new things. Got lots of interesting interviews after the practice. So yeah, good first week of spring ball in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it throughout the show. This new thing that you're talking about, learn some new things. I think we also learned what may be a new thing, but is also an old thing, and that was Denzel Burke saying Natty or bust. So I want to talk about this idea of national championship or bust. In your mind, what does the bust mean in that? Because my answer to this question depends on two different definitions of bust.
So I think, to me, it's, this goes back to the Okies who had the, in the Dust Bowl days or whatever, and they had I'm conflating two different periods of American history, but that's okay. I haven't had to go to American history class in a while. But it was like the Okies going west to California, and they'd put California or bust on the back of their cars or their Conestoga wagons, whichever period in history you want to ascribe this to. And that was basically like, we'll get to California or, we're going to be broke and we failed. I think that's kind of been the historical meaning of natty or bust in this context as well, where it's like, either you win the national championship or this year has been a disappointment. I think that's just, this is kind of a slightly less violent version of the old Jim Harbaugh, we're going to beat Ohio State and we're going to die trying. I think this is essentially, you're going to win the national championship, or it's going to be, or we're going to leave here disappointed.
Well, I mean, with your bringing back the etymology of it, it's just as dark and sinister as Jim Harbaugh's thing, because we're going to win a national championship or die in the desert in New Mexico on our way to California. I mean, that's not any kind of chipper type of thing. I'm with you in terms of that definition. It's just, some people take it a step farther, and it's like some championship or bust means if you don't win it this year, you break everything up. And I think that's completely ludicrous to feel like if Ohio State doesn't win it this year, that you have to break anything up. I do, however, feel like if you have all of this talent coming back, and all of this talent is coming back to win a national championship, if you don't do that, then obviously it is a disappointment. But when was the last time it wasn't a disappointment for Ohio State to not win a national championship? I asked on Twitter that, is it a national championship or bust season? And we'll get to the results here in a little bit, but like the last time it wasn't a disappointment, would that be 2012 when they couldn't go to the playoffs?
Well, I think
Or the BCS?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that kind of depends on the person, because there are people who will tell you that any season where you do not win a national championship is a failure, full stop, period, no exceptions. And, those people, I think, are pretty easy for me to go, okay, that's stupid, because if that's the case, then exactly 2 Ohio State seasons in the last, 45 have been successful, and everything else for the winningest program in the nation over that span, every other season has been a failure other than those 2. Like, that's probably not a realistic standard. That's also a standard where if you want to set yourself up to be a grumpy old man, by all means, live your life by that standard, because nothing will ever be good enough and you will always be angry. And I mean, that is certainly one way to live your life. And if you choose that way, I'm sorry that cloud did that thing to you, whatever that was, but keep yelling at it. I'm sure it will fix the problem eventually. Beyond that, I think there are plenty of seasons where Ohio State, I mean, back in the 90s, the general consensus among Ohio State fans was, you should be beating Michigan half of the time or more. You should be winning the Big Ten every year or two. You should, say 2 out of 4 years you win the Big Ten. 2 or 3 years out of 4 you beat Michigan. That's a good season. You can have a successful season that doesn't include a national championship. 132 of the 133 teams playing FBS football are not going to win the national championship. That does not mean they're all failures.
I'm trying to think back to some seasons that are similar to this in terms of the expectations, because the expectations this year are higher than most years. In most years, you think, could Ohio State win it all this year? They probably could. There's certainly a chance. It wouldn't be crazy if they did. This year, however, it's gone up a notch. And I think the 2 seasons, Tom, that I immediately think back to where you have this much hype, they both ended up as busts. And that would be 2015 and...
Well, I think it's both 1998 and 2003. I think all of those
2003 too, yeah.
I think all of those are kind of the same thing. And that's kind of the weird thing about Ohio State football, because 1969, 1970, those were seasons like that. And no matter what the banner and the Woody Hayes says, they didn't win the national championship in 1970. That's the National Football Foundation, and they gave it before the bowl games. And so, congratulations, you won the thing that you didn't win because you lost to Stanford. So in the Rose Bowl, I think the funny thing about Ohio State football is you go through all the years where it was a year like, oh man, well, they just won the national championship last year and they've got everyone back. All the super softs are back in 1969. What could possibly go wrong? And then they lose at Michigan 24-12. And they're all back in 1970 and they run through the table and they beat Michigan, and then they lose Jim Plunkett and Stanford in the Rose Bowl. And then in 1998, they've got everyone there. They've got, the Andy Katzenmoyer SI cover, all that stuff. And they lose to Michigan State. And in 2003, they have, everyone back from the national championship team except for basically Maurice Clarett. And they lose at Wisconsin, and then they lose to Michigan. And 2015, they have got everyone back from the 2014 season, and they lose to Michigan State. And it feels like those seasons, the seasons where everyone goes in and goes, this is the year, it's rarely the year. 1968, no, I wasn't around, but I don't think anyone was thinking, oh, well, we've got a bunch of sophomores. What could possibly go wrong? National championship or bust? No. 2002, there was plenty of times during that season that, no, you were not thinking anything close to national championship. 2014, I've told this story before, but I took my daughter, who was at that point 4 years old, to the Indiana game, and it was an icy day, and she was cold, and she was 4, so we're walking out of the stadium. It's the third quarter. Indiana was leading, or Indiana took the lead as we were walking out of the stadium, something like that. And I got to tell you, as I was walking out of that stadium on the week before the Michigan game, I was not thinking, what's going to happen to this team in 5 weeks? Natty or busts? Not a chance. A lot of those national championship seasons come kind of out of nowhere, and a lot of the seasons where you're like, I know what's going to happen this year, you don't know what's going to happen that year.
And there have been years, 2019, you can see this, as the season goes on, you're like, things start to come together and they look better. This year might be the opposite or the inverse of 2015, in that the 2015 team, some of that team was so satisfied with what they had done the year before. This team is so unsatisfied with what they've done the year before that it's a completely different kind of hunger and desire and mentality. And they've put the pressure on themselves by coming back. The best way to alleviate the pressure is just to leave the situation, go to the NFL, go to the transfer portal. Not that any of these seniors were going to go to the portal, but just remove yourself from it. Instead, they have chosen to embrace it. You've got Denzel Burke openly saying Natty or bust, and everybody else is probably saying it behind the scenes. That's a ton of pressure. I think it's the best opportunity to handle pressure is with a veteran-laden team. And so I think it's helpful to handle that when it's maybe the veterans who have created that pressure. But obviously, it's not just that. The pressure is going to come from outside. Pressure is going to come from the Ohio State fans. This is something that could be too much for some teams. I think this team has a pretty good makeup. And when you have all come back as a collective decision, you have to understand that there is going to be pressure. But as I think Chip Kelly said it on Tuesday, there's no more pressure, no outside pressure could equate to the pressure that they put on themselves. And I think that's going to be interesting to watch manifest from now until the late February when the season is finally over.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That we've talked about this in different contexts before. That however much you, dear listener, who is listening to an Ohio State football podcast in mid March, however much you think about Ohio State football, the people who are doing this for a living, as actual Ohio State football coaches and now players who are making NIL money, I assure you they are thinking about Ohio State football much more. They are more invested in it than you are. However invested you are, they are in with both feet more so than you are. There is no, Ryan Day, I'm sure, is aware of, like, hey, you got all these guys back. You failed to reach your stated team goals a few years in a row. You just had a nice little kick of NIL money come in to bring you, bring back some of these guys and also bring in some of these guys. Seems like now it's your turn. Like, okay, we have put the ball on the tee. We would like you to hit this one straight down the middle of the fairway. We do not want this to go into the woods in late November again. And I don't think anyone in the state of Ohio is more keenly aware of the fact that it would be in Ohio State's best interest to beat Michigan this year than Ryan Day. I don't think there's anyone in the state of Ohio who is more aware of the fact that it would be in Ohio State's best interest to win the Big Ten this year than Ryan Day. I don't think there's anyone in the state of Ohio who is more aware of the fact that the expectation is you are going to win the national championship this year, or, at the very least, strongly compete for the national championship. If they lose, then, if they lose in like the Georgia, Alabama overtime national championship game, like at some point you kind of go like, yeah, what are you going to do? But you got to get there, and you got to, make a real good run at it, I would say, for sure, is sort of the expectation. And, I don't know. I think the Michigan thing is fair. I think the Big Ten thing is fair. With this being the first year of the new playoff, there's so much new stuff this year that I don't know that it's really fair to say if you don't win everything that you can possibly win, this is a failure. I don't know that that's really completely fair, but, for the players who have come back for one last ride, I get why they feel that way.
Yeah, and I know Day and his staff are very focused on depth and creating more depth because they've had some unfortunate circumstances over his time that have cost them perhaps one or more national championships, where whether it's Justin Fields getting banged up in 2019 or J.K. Dobbins leaving the game against Clemson. If he doesn't leave that game, I don't think Ohio State loses. Marvin Harrison getting hit in the head against Georgia, leaving that game. If he doesn't leave that game, I don't think Ohio State loses. Just the unfortunate circumstances, you're right. And now you're adding another 2-3 games to this where good luck. Like, the only reason there's going to be a national champion is because somebody has to win it. Like, you can't have, we all lost, we all got beat up. Like, somebody's going to make it through. And the only thing you can do is try to be able to prepare yourself to withstand all of the bad things that are going to happen, because it's not going to be perfect. I don't care if you're the best team in the nation. Ohio State may be the best team in the nation. They're not going to look like it every single week, and they're going to lose guys. Guys are going to be missing for a time, and you have to overcome it. Like last year, you lose Lathan Ransom. You overcome it with Sonny Styles. Jordan Hancock goes to nickel full-time, blossoms. And everything that happened last year helps them this year. So national title or bust, I think in the context that we're talking in terms of it would be a disappointment. Yes. Now, can you have unfortunate disappointments and like, boy, this is a really fantastic season in just the fourth quarter, the lousy refs, and 3 of them were from Louisiana, so they were cheating. Like, that thing can happen. Do you want to take a guess? So I asked this, I don't know, 15 minutes ago. There's like 700 votes now. Is it national championship or bust this year for Ohio State, Tom? The percentage of people, well, first off, what do you think is leading right now? Yes or no?
Oh, I think the question is not whether yes or no is leading. I think the question is does yes have 90 what percent of the vote? Is it 95% of the vote? Is it 92% of the vote? I think that broadly the consensus is going to be very strongly that yes, it is national championship or bust for Ohio State.
Well, Tom, you were way off. It is only 90% of the vote. A lot more reasonable Buckeye fans out there than you thought, Tom. You cast aspersions. You put all of these Buckeye fans into the crazy category, and yet there are 10% sane people who are like, hey, it's not about winning a national championship. It's about the friends we make along the way. And Tom, that is why when you have a healthy culture, you don't need to win. You want to make friends. So make some friends sometime, Tom. Don't always be worried about, I know you're a coach. I worry that you're too focused on winning and not focused enough on just having fun.
I am struck by the fact that you always hear about the 10% lunatic fringe online, and now it's the 10% not lunatic fringe online, I guess. Although I don't know. I think in a typical year, national championship or bust is a crazy mentality. This year, I mean, Ohio State is one of the, I'm kind of talking myself in circles here where I feel like I've made each point from different angles during the course of the 16 minutes or so we've been going. I think of all the years, this is a year when, if you wanted to make that case, I think you can make that case. It's, they are, I have not looked at the national championship lines for, like actual online betting places, but I would assume that it's probably Ohio State and Georgia are both, the very, very close to the top favorites this year. Because, there are a lot of teams. Last year was kind of a down year in college football on the whole. Michigan's going to take a big step back this year. Washington's going to take probably a pretty substantial step back this year. We'll see about Texas. Alabama is probably going to take a step back this year. Like a lot of the teams that you have seen around the top of the sport recently are probably not going to be quite as good as they were last year. So, Tony, I'm going to take a guess at the top 5 teams in the betting right now. You appear to have stopped typing, so I assume you have this pulled up. I'm going to say Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Oregon 3, Texas 3, Oregon 4, Alabama 5. How did I do?
Well, Tom, let me look it up here. The reason I wasn't typing.
I thought when I was talking about it and then saw you typing, I was like, good. He's picked up on this subtle clue. After 1,000 episodes of this show, we can finish each other's sandwiches. It is just it's like telepathic here. And
keep going.
Okay. Telepathy.
Okay, here you go.
Webster's Dictionary defines telepathy as.
All right, stop. What were your top 5? It was Georgia, then Ohio State.
Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Alabama. That's not, I'm saying that I don't think Alabama is probably the 5th most likely to win the national championship, but that's what I'm kind of guessing.
If you would like to choose somebody other than Alabama, and you should, who would it be?
Someone other than Alabama. I really feel pretty strongly like the national championship might come out of those 4 teams. Can you tell me, is it an SEC team?
It is.
It is. Okay. So we've got Texas, we've got Georgia.
I will tell you, it is not Mississippi State.
Thank you.
Yes.
Vanderbilt. Got it. They finally have their Australian punter. The final piece of the puzzle is in place. It's not someone real stupid like Texas A&M, is it?
No, it is LSU.
LSU. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's
who did they get to be their quarterback? Or is it still going to be the kid they had backing
Nussmeier?
up Jade Daniels?
Garrett Nussmeier? I do not know. This is
so the rest of do you want to hear the rest of it? So you had the
Sure.
top 4, right? And then LSU. First off, Georgia is plus 330. Ohio State is plus 450. Texas is plus 750. Oregon plus 100, plus 1,000. LSU plus 1,200. Alabama at 6 plus 1,400. Don't touch Alabama.
Yeah.
Ole Miss is plus 1,500.
Nope.
Yes, Ole Miss.
May I short them, please?
Here's another one you might want to short. Michigan plus 1,600.
May I parlay a short of Ole Miss and Michigan together?
You're not going to get great odds. Florida State plus
That's
2,000.
why you parlay, Tony. I don't need to explain this to you.
And then Clemson plus 2,200. Penn State is plus 2,500. Any other Big Ten teams in here? Oh, USC plus 4,000. Washington plus 7,000. Might be a little high. Wisconsin plus 10,000. And Nebraska, you can get them for a steal plus 20,000. Same as UCLA and Iowa. Don't do it.
May I parlay? I would like to throw $1 million in there on a three-way parlay of not UCLA, not Iowa, and not Nebraska. What do I win? I'm gonna come out with $7.32 and actually lose money due to inflation, the time value of money and all that. But that's I mean, I think if you look at the top, if you just tell me you can have the top four, and it's a 12-team playoff, so lots more teams are going to be in there and have a chance to win. If you give me the top four, frankly, if you give me maybe even the top three, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Top four, it feels like there is a strong top four this year: Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. I think that's. I mean, first of all, we have recently booked our flights to Eugene, Oregon for the Ohio State Oregon game. Boy, let me tell you, I might start adding that one to the countdown at the beginning of our Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning episodes, because boy, that is going to be a monster game this year.
Well, and I'm looking real quick to see if, because I assume Georgia, people just are going to continue to put Georgia up top until they lose, I don't know, 2 years in a row and not make the national title. But that Oregon game could very well be 1 versus 2 and almost maybe 2 versus 3, just depending on what happens between Georgia and Texas in that before that game. And I don't know, Tom, is it showing too much respect to Oregon to put them in the countdown? What if it gets back to them and they start to get full of themselves, and they need to earn their place in the Big Ten? And I got a feeling they're going to do it. Just FYI, next year or this year. But yeah, that's going to be one of the games of the year. And I didn't care if we had to drive. We are going to get there one way or another. But we do not have to drive. So that is fantastic.
The Ohio State-Oregon game could actually end up being a 1 versus 2 game, because Georgia has a couple losable games. I don't think, they're going to be favored in both of them, but they play Clemson in Atlanta in the kickoff weekend, and then they go to Tuscaloosa on September 28th. So those are 2 games that they could potentially lose before the Ohio State-Oregon game, which is October 6th, I believe. Right? 6th, 13th, something like that. But either way, before that weekend. So yeah, I think that's that. I mean, I know that's going to be a very hyped game. I think that could very well be a 1 versus 2 game.
And then, of course, Texas next season at Michigan on the 7th, almost assuredly going to lose that game to the plus 1,600 Michigan Wolverines. But then they've got a pretty good schedule until October 19th when Georgia comes to town, and that'll be possibly another 1 versus 2, if you will. So that'll be a fun one to look forward to. That is the week Ohio State is on a bye. So if you want to make the road trip to DKR, by all means, go ahead and do it. Driving to Texas is not that bad, despite what Tom or I might tell you. It's a fantastic drive. It's just a quick trip. Several Buckies to pass the time. And also, I guess if you go the wrong way, you can head up on the I-80, world's largest truck stop in Iowa, and then just go south from there.
That is not the most direct route. As someone who has driven both to and from Dallas with you, I can tell you that is not the most direct route.
Tom, we also talked to Jim Knowles today. We spent a lot of time on Tuesday talking about what Chip Kelly had to say, so let's talk a little bit about what Jim Knowles had to say. And a lot of this is talking about experimenting and trying to get all of these different defensive guys on the field. And one of the questions he was asked is, do you have all of the pieces here defensively that you need to have a great defense? And he said yes. And then he said that I took that for granted when I came to Ohio State. And so I typed that into the bullet points that I'm writing. And I have people saying, like, trying to interpret what he meant by I took that for granted when I came to Ohio State. My thought was that you just understand that there's going to be talent. Other people are saying, well, he took it for granted that he wouldn't need to create scheme up a whole bunch of stuff with the jack, and you got to do this. You can just let the players play. And I saw somebody else saying, well, I think it means that you can be more aggressive, or that he was mistaken in that they could be so aggressive, which you could understand because they did make some mistakes with their aggression. And he took it for granted that he can't be that aggressive. So I'm only mentioning this, Tom, because other people were asking me about it, so I wanted to throw this out there. And then basically the ultimate gist of it is I went through and looked at the full quote because as I'm typing it and as he's saying it, it's very loud in there. But basically I was right. And that's the only reason I wanted to mention it, that he took it for granted that, you just take for granted that there's going to be talent on hand at Ohio State. But the thing, Tom, that as we talk to all of the guys today, including Jim Knowles, the talent that is on hand now has increased each year, and it is a much higher level now than it was when we talked to Jordan Hancock. We talked to Denzel Burke about, hey, when you guys got here, and they're not trying to insult the cornerback room when they got here, but boy, things are much different now overall than they were 3 years ago, 2 years ago even.
Absolutely. And I don't think you need to look further than Denzel Burke started on day one as a true freshman and was not, the single most hyped corner even in his class. And he was just day one out there for playing Minnesota at Minnesota on Labor Day weekend in 2021. And you look at Jermaine Matthews, who is a 5-star, who has lived up to every bit of the billing so far early in his career, but still lived up to all that billing. And, they're comfortable with him playing, but he's not starting. And that's his second year. And he's not starting based on the fact that they've got a couple guys ahead of him. And, if you put Jermaine Matthews on that 2021 team, maybe freshman Jermaine Matthews, certainly sophomore Jermaine Matthews, he is cornerback number one with a bullet. There's not even a question who else, that there's someone else out there as good as he is, and he's not starting this year. So I do think that's a pretty good indication of, okay, this is a very different team than that 2021 team was. Not really a question. And that was the year before Knowles got there. That was that last Kerry Combs / Matt Barnes year. But, when Jim Knowles came to Ohio State, I think he recognized, okay, you've kind of had to do it with, you kind of grind up your leftover meat pieces, and then you make your sausage, because you don't have, you don't have the tomahawk ribeye, fancy, Ohio State is shopping at the fancy grocery store. Oklahoma State is, going through, what's on sale at Aldi this week. And he had to do more with less at Oklahoma State. And I'm sure when he showed up at Ohio State, he knew he could do more with more. And it feels like maybe, number one, the talent level on the Ohio State defense has gone up in the 3 years he's been there. But number two, I think he's just gotten a better sense for, okay, this is a very different group of players than I've had before. And I can do some stuff and I can not do other stuff. And some stuff will work better. And there are some ways I can take advantage of this. And, one of the things that Denzel Burke said on Thursday was he can be more aggressive now because he knows he has Caleb Downs behind him. So he can, he can be more aggressive in trying to jump an out route or something like that, because he knows if he doesn't get it, it's okay. You got Caleb Downs back there. The days of Marcus Hooker or Isaiah Pryor or any of the Ohio State safeties of the past that I think people still wake up screaming in their sleep, thinking of some of the safety play they've had there. Those days are gone. And, now Jim Knowles has all of these different players that he, most of them he's worked with before. And if not, he's seen them on film and he knows what they can do. And, he has gone from a pretty good but big play susceptible defense in 2022 to a very good defense last year to now I think the expectation is probably better than very good this year.
It's amazing to me, and it will always be amazing to me that Ohio State made it to a national championship game. It was a COVID year, but made it to a national championship game. Marcus Williamson starting all 8 games for them at safety. Marcus Hooker starting 5 games, Seven Banks starting all of those games. And then you go to the 2021 season where Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock are freshmen. Like, Ryan Watts was the opening day starting corner back then. And that was partly because Cam Brown was injured, but that was a recurring theme throughout the season. So 2021, they're going with Ryan Watts, Cam Brown, Seven Banks. But you always had Denzel Burke on the other side. But even at safety that year, they start Proctor was the opening day, and then Bryson Shaw eventually takes over. But the other safety, you got Lathan Ransom, you had Cam Martinez playing, you had Marcus Williamson again, you had Craig Young starting a game that year in 2021. And then even 2022, where you've got Jair Brown starting a game, J.K. Johnson starting a handful of games. Again, Cam Martinez gets in there for a start as well. There are guys that have been on those teams that would never see the field now in this defense. And that's not just because Caleb Downs is here. It's because the recruiting has picked up. The overall talent has picked up. And in my opinion, Tom, this is a national championship or bust type of season. I'm going to be the first to say that. I'm going to throw that out there. I don't know how people are going to feel about it. I don't know if Ohio State fans are going to get upset about me putting those kinds of expectations out there. But that's where I am. So anything else, Tom? I know we don't want to go too long. We don't want to overstay our welcome. Although Kevin's not here, so that's not usually going to be an issue. Anything else from the day that you wanted to mention that we didn't already mention on today's morning show?
Well, I am proud of you for it took 1,002 episodes, but you finally found something that you could get 90% of our audience to agree with you with. So that's good. Nicely done there.
Thank you.
And, I mean, I do think you mentioned the recruiting, and I think that is an important part here where, why was the 2020, 2021 Ohio State secondary, why were they in such rough shape? And that's the difference between the Taver Johnson recruiting era and the Tim Walton recruiting era. And they went a couple seasons where you don't have to miss very much. You just miss a few times and you have a couple late flips, and Clark Phillips flips to Utah and Jordan Battle flips to Alabama. And you just lose a few of those guys. And then you have a couple guys transfer out, and it's like, it gets real thin real fast. And I think this is a testimony to Tim Walton and the recruiting that he's done since he's gotten to Ohio State. But, the safety recruiting has been pretty darn good too. And it continues to get better where, this is going to be unquestionably the best secondary Ohio State's had in a number of years, maybe 2019, that's probably how far back you have to go at least. They're in on potentially like 3 of the top 4 corners in the class, and also a 5-star safety, and also, just on and on and on. It is, this is potentially, I think there's probably going to be a drop off after all of these guys leave this year, but I don't think it's going to fall off a cliff. It feels like, Jim Knowles just signed a contract extension, and it feels, Tony, like he's going to be set up to be a pretty successful defensive coordinator at Ohio State for a while now.
Yeah, and he seems to be pretty happy. A few things here. On Sonny Styles, he talked about when Knowles got here, people talked to him about Sonny Styles. It was always that he was eventually going to be a linebacker. Everybody knew this. But he and Sonny both wanted him to start out at safety to get a better feel for the entire defense. And then when you're fully grown into it, then fine. But he talked about how he did the same thing with Malcolm Rodriguez, who was at Oklahoma State. Initially was a 3-star, 2-star option quarterback, defensive back. They put him at safety. I think he maybe started a year or two at safety, then became their will linebacker, led the team in tackles, had 140 some tackles. Now he's a linebacker with the Lions. So there's proof of concept with that. And so that's something that they look at. And then something that Jordan Hancock said in terms of going from corner to nickel and handling it, he said he would have been able to do that without Tim Walton, who has the experience in the NFL and college, just being able to help him watch enough film to understand all of the nuances and all of the reading that he has to do. He talks about how Walton gets to the Woody at like 5 a.m, and Hancock's like, I don't get there until 6:30, but right away we're watching film. And I talked about on the morning show how he's added weight to prepare for a heavier workload. But just a couple of last things that I wanted to throw in. And if you've got anything else, Tom, before we go, now.
I do not.
Boom. Perfect. So that will do it. I want to thank you all for tuning in. If you have not yet liked this video, if you're watching it, please do. Hit the bell to be notified when we go live. We went live earlier on Tuesday, Thursday, both days. I don't know when we're going to go live again, but there will be videos dropping throughout. Tons of interviews from today that you'll want to check out. And I still have Tyleek Williams and Jack Sawyer to throw in there. So be patient, please. I would appreciate it. And then, of course, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we are talking about all of this on the Buckeye Huddle message board. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.